So the crew you can see on the screen is the 2017 Henley Women's Cantabs 8 that won the Club 8s. And here we see them in pretty much the last 100, 150 metres before the finish line. Now, a little bit of context. This crew is not the most powerful crew on the water. So I looked back and their average erg was 732 for 2K. And yet despite that, they're a very technically effective crew. So at this point in the race, they're accelerating towards the finish line as hard as they can. The opposition, just out of shot, are more or less neck and neck and closing the gap. And the crew here is looking to step up the rate and step up the rate and step up the rate as they wind for the finish line. Now, the split that they hit and held up the course, and that's going upstream, was 135, 136, and they knocked 11 seconds off the course record. Despite not being the biggest crew, not being the most powerful crew, a couple of novices on board, they were able to express very effective technique in this very sort of stressful, difficult situation, and that was them just crossing the finish line. And what I want to look at in this video is the way in which you can develop crews to be technically effective over the course of a season. So there's kind of three contexts here in which I'm introducing this ladder model. One is you're starting the season off and you are planning what you're going to be doing over the months as you prepare for that race. Yeah, maybe actually you've only got a number of weeks until your key race, but you could still use this to help you prepare. The second context is that situation where you've got a number of weeks or maybe a number of outings back to back where you are looking at getting progression. And then the final context is almost kind of within the moment where you're making a decision as to what the next drill is going to be. How do you select what the drill should be and what level to pitch it at? This is where I kind of fall back in my mind on this ladder model. So top right is your race situation. Now, this is your main race. This is the key race. It's the big final where you really want your crew to perform and you don't want anything to get in the way of them being able to execute that performance that they can be really proud of. And that requires a lot of preparation because they need to be able to execute a number of skills, but not just in the comfort of their own river, but somewhere that is unusual for them, in a situation where it's a big final, so it's stressful, there's a big sense of occasion. In the particular context we were just looking at, we had a fast 8 next to them who they'd got a lead on early on, but they were closing back. And as they were coming towards the finish line, both crews were accelerating in there. And, it was pretty nip and tuck. The actual margin at the finish line was, I think, a canvas. Yeah, it was a pretty tight race. And you need to be able to continue to exhibit that really effective technique at high rate, at full power, when it really hurts because you are pushing as hard as you possibly can, in time with absolutely everyone else in the boat as well, to keep it coordinated and keep it effective. That is what we're trying to prepare crews for, top right. And as you kind of go down the ladder towards the bottom rung, you can see the situation becomes a bit more controlled, a bit easier, a bit less stressful. Going right down to the bottom where you've got drills on the gym mat where maybe someone's lying flat on their back, activating their core. Maybe they're using free weights to work out how they can switch on their lats. Maybe you're doing some kind of weird movement to help them work out how to switch on their glutes, but not their hamstrings. There's a lot of time to process things. It's a very controlled environment. We're nowhere near a boat. What we're looking at trying to do is teach them the basic movement patterns, maybe sort of atomizing them and breaking them down initially into a series of individual skills, which you then blend into a movement until they're able to then execute that on the erg. And maybe you'll be looking for them to be able to repeat it in a repeatable way on the erg before you then move it into the boat. But what you're looking at doing is constantly having this idea of progression. Now, probably the biggest step on this ladder is going from drills in a sat boat. Maybe we're in an 8 and you've got stern pair or stern 4 sitting the boat while bow 4 practices the skill. You then bring in an extra pair of people to increase the speed, just make it a little bit more challenging for the crew. Can they still complete the skill effectively? And then you bring in the last pair. So now you've got the whole 8 rowing. Can they still exhibit the skill when you've got the whole crew rowing? Because then you've not only got to execute the skill, you've got to do it in time with all these other people, while also usually rowing an effective stroke, which allows the boat to sit, so you're not creating problems that get in the way of you focusing on the thing you want to focus on. So there's a big step there. But then we're looking at trying to get the crew to be able to execute that skill for a long period of time at low rate paddling, then in low rate pieces, and then gradually you're stepping up the difficulty towards that race situation. And then maybe even through a number of races where you are practicing your race plan, where you are looking at putting yourself in a situation where the crew isn't just rowing good technique, but they're also able to do it when they've got opposition next to them as well, which can be a different kettle of fish. All the way through this, what you're looking to do is effectively reduce the risk of something going wrong for your crew. So these are the three contexts that we're going to think about this ladder model in. Number one is this kind of month-to-month or week-to-week timescale. We're then going to zoom into the context of maybe a single outing or a string of outings. And then finally, we're going to look at when we're considering a particular skill. Is this the right drill to choose at this right moment? So first of all, looking at this month-to-month, kind of week-to-week idea, I'll do a different video with a bit more depth on it. But effectively what you want to do is you want to create a risk assessment. These are the things that could go wrong for my crew on race day. And I'm going to spend the next weeks or the next months systematically reducing the risk associated with that. So you might think, this is something that is extremely likely to happen. And if it goes wrong, the crew is going to, not have an effective catch. And therefore they're going to lose length. They're going to lose efficiency. For all these reasons, this is something I'm going to prioritize as being important. So over the course of the weeks and the months, we look to reduce the risk of that thing happening. We take it from like a 1 in 4 chance happening to like a 1 in 40 chance of happening. We've made it 10 times less likely to go wrong. That's great. We're also spending that time giving the crew the skills and tools that they will need to get it back on track when it goes wrong. If you're racing down the championship course for Eights Head, I don't think there'll be a single crew on the river who's taken a perfect stroke at every single point down the course. There'll be a lot of crews who do make mistakes, but they quickly react to it, get it back on track. Every time they come around a corner and hit a patch of lumpy water, they quickly adapt their technique to match that. And those crews that are very adaptive to change, the ones which will often do well, they don't start off being super adaptive to change. That is something that they learn in time. Okay, so month to month, week to week, how does this ladder model work? Well, just here's a bit of a screenshot of a part of a training plan spreadsheet where you can see there's a kind of a light, medium, heavy loading pattern. You might take a new skill in a light week and introduce it for the first time. You will then teach the crew to be able to execute that skill and execute it repeatedly, but giving them time to pause, to reflect, to process, to think about how they could change things to achieve what it is you're asking them to do. If they then move that into medium week, now we're upping the kilometers, we're upping the intensity. Can they still execute that skill now that we're rowing for longer and rowing harder? Then in heavy week, we're rowing longer again. We're rowing with more intensity, more rating. Can they still exhibit that skill? Again, helping them to take something and move it up the ladder towards that race situation. You might also want to think about periodizing your approach to technical coaching. If, like our squad, you have quite a lot of turnover from year to year, new joiners coming in from different clubs, people having rowed with different styles, with different squads, then you need to make sure that everyone is singing off the same hymn sheet and they've got the same core technical skills. And there's probably 3 or 4 things that we consider that we do differently to other clubs. And this is, the early part of the year where we would look to periodize that, progressively moving people's skills in those key areas up the ladder so that we know that they can execute those with confidence. And I've got a picture here of a guy spinning plates, because when you are looking to prepare a crew to row in that kind of very stressful technical situation, there are a number of things they've got to be able to exhibit all at once. typically rowers are only able to think about one thing at a time. And if they're thinking about that one thing that you want them to think about, then that is a big battle that's been won. As a coach, you're having to think about how you're going to kind of interleave all of these separate technical skills, how you're going to kind of combine them together, how you're going to get them to work in sync when rowers can only think about one thing at a time, and you're trying to nudge all of these different technical skills further and further up the ladder towards that race situation. You'll pay more attention to certain skills than others because they are more important to you than others. But nevertheless, on race day, there's a whole range of things that crew's got to be able to do and do really effectively. Okay, so the kind of second situation, we've gone from looking at the whole season or month-to-month kind of view, and we're now zooming into either a single outing or a string of outings, where we are looking to try to create that progression going up the ladder. And I've got a picture here of like kind of a base camp where the crew has to be able to achieve the skill at base camp before they're allowed to move up to camp 1. And they've then got to consolidate, make things robust at camp 1 before they then move on to camp 2, and so on and so on. They almost have to earn permission to move on to the next step of difficulty with a particular skill before they're able to progress onto the more difficult situation. Now, within a single outing, what you're looking to try to do is string together a series of drills in order to create progression. You will often start the next session where you started the previous session, but the crew will progress through the skills faster because they've done it once and they've got further. Second time around they do it, they get up through those same levels just a bit faster, which means that you can get more content into the end of the session. Third session, maybe you'll skip ahead and you cut off the first part of the session. You just get them to ramp up to where they were again earlier in the session, and you add some more content on, pushing up the difficulty all the time. As for what the perfect drill is, again, I'll do a separate video on that in terms of how you think about getting those skills to fit together. But the main idea here, again, is that there is that progression. If you have a crew coming off the water and they feel that they have progressed during the session, then they will usually be a pretty happy crew. So getting that progression built into a single outing is important. So, maybe a really basic outing could be, we're going to do a warm-up based upon the sorts of skills that we were doing last time, maybe putting some sort of foundation skills in place to prepare us and prime us for the work that we're about to do. We're then going to do some work. Maybe the boat is static. Maybe the boat is being sat for us. It's a controlled situation where we can think about this skill. We're then going to start to do it in a dynamic situation where the boat is moving, and maybe the boat's moving progressively faster and faster, increasing that difficulty of executing the skill. And then we're going to finish the session with some bursts or with some short pieces where we're creating contrast between when they are executing the skill and when they're not executing the skill, to help them learn what's the same and what's different, what have they noticed, and can they kind of can they express that, can they build on that, can they agree with others or challenge others as to when they think it's working. And when they're able to express that, they're in a really good position to be able to repeat it themselves in future outings. Okay, but that needs to come from progression within the outing. Don't view a drill as being an isolated fix. It is always part of a progression. I'm sure we've all been in boats before where we've been rowing along, it's not quite been working. The cox or the coach shouts for a particular drill. We stop, we do the drill. It doesn't quite work, we do it again. Okay, boat's working great. Then we go back into rowing again, and maybe it works for 4 or 5 strokes, but then we just go straight back to what we were doing before. That has not been a useful drill. It's not been sticky. What we've learned from the drill hasn't actually affected the way that we're moving the boat in terms of the paddling. So that is not effective progression. If we're doing a drill as a one-off fix and it's not leading to anything, then that is not useful. Okay, then it comes to thinking about a particular drill or skill. So we've got a picture at the top here, 3 bowls of porridge. There's too cold, just right, and too hot. When you are pitching a drill at a crew, you're looking to try to achieve a change. You are looking to use that drill to push them further up the ladder. Now, if the drill is too easy, they'll just complete it. and they won't actually learn anything from it. It's not been difficult enough for them to actually change anything about the way that they're moving the boat. Now, maybe, again, in the video I'll do on drills, we're going to think about drills that are accessible at a range of levels, so that when you've got a range of experiences in your boat, those who are less experienced can get some benefit from it. Those who are much more experienced will get benefits that are different from the same drill. So they're very kind of rich drills. But generally, if that drill is too easy for everyone, no one's learning anything. Okay, if the drill is too hard for everyone, well, they're not going to be able to complete it. They're going to get frustrated. They're maybe going to start thinking about whether you know what you're doing as a coach. Because, well, first of all, you've asked them to do something that's way beyond their capabilities. So you're clearly not a good judge of where they are. They're going to feel bad because they can't do a drill and they don't feel good about not being able to do things. And, third, you're just asking them to go again and again on something that's too hard. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to reduce the chances of them actually being able to do the drill at all. So, too easy, nothing gets learned. Too hard, people get frustrated, nothing gets learned. You need this zone in the middle, which is just right. So, what you need to be able to do is diagnose, for all of the different skills that you are interested in, where is your crew on the ladder? And what do you need to do to just push them up to that next rung? What kinds of levers can you pull? Can you increase the rating? Can you increase the power? Can you increase the stroke length? Maybe you've capped those things in order to teach them a skill lower down the ladder, and now we're starting to push them higher up again. Okay, so we're looking to balance that level of difficulty. And you've got a guy on the tightrope here who is sort of balancing difficulty between too easy and too hard, maybe. What you want to have, I think, is a kind of a perfect drill, is one that people can complete successfully some of the time, but they're still making mistakes some of the time. So maybe like 50% of the time they're on it, and then 25% of the time they're nearly there, and then 25% of the time it's going wrong. That is maybe the right sort of level at which you need to have people working, because it shows them they can be successful. That's motivating. A number of strokes they feel are almost there, and as they progress, they will start to feel that they're getting a large number of strokes in every block of 10 strokes, which are working. They feel that progression. Not only can they be successful, but they can be increasingly successful if they apply themselves in a purposeful manner. And then there are some strokes on the end that they're not getting, and that is always showing them that there is more to come. They can do that if they continue to work for them. But by moving them up the ladder at a pace in time with their improvement, you're always leaving that kind of split of strokes that are successful, ones that are nearly there and ones that definitely aren't. You're always just leaving that there. They feel the progression, so you up the difficulty. It's a bit of a balancing act, because if you push them too fast, they'll very quickly find themselves beyond the point at which they can execute. If you push them too slowly, they'll spend a lot of time doing stuff which is basically going through motions and not being particularly useful. So, just back to the ladder model. It's not a complete model, but I think it's quite useful, because in the situation where you're looking at planning things week to week, it allows you to think about how we're going to deliver things in a periodized manner. It allows you to think about how we can reduce the risk to our crew of things going wrong on race day in a structured and progressive way. It allows you to communicate your key priorities to the coaches that you work with and to the athletes, so they understand the importance of different technical aspects. It provides you with a way of pushing crews upwards, up the ladder, in a range of different technical areas. It's the sort of thing whereby, even within an outing, you're thinking, how can I challenge the crew to move the skill further on and give them the opportunity to feel that sense of improvement? Because again, regardless of the level that you're operating at, it doesn't have to be high performance. It doesn't have to be winning Henley Women's Regatta. It could just be a participation crew going out and wanting to enjoy their rowing. They will come off the water a lot happier if they feel they have progressed as a crew than if they've gone on the water and just done another outing like they always do. And it can also help you to really zero in on individual skills and individual drills, thinking, okay, this is where the crew is with this particular skill. This is a number of ways in which I can push them forwards. Let's see if we can get them up to the next rung of the ladder. Let's see if we can unlock that permission to push them again to the next step and to the next step progressively from there. Give it a go. Have a think. Maybe there are situations in which this could be useful that I haven't talked about this evening, which you'd like to get back to me on. So, yeah, let me know. Have a good night.